holding rifles. We're parallel to them in the car, a car length away. And we can see clearly one of the men, his hands are covered in blood. And we see two bodies and the driver in the passenger seat, obviously dead. And we only slow down for a split second just to comprehend what we're seeing. And then we speed off again. We tell my cousin to drive and not to stop, to drive fast, drive now. That's what he does.
That's the voice of Canadian-Israeli Nova Music Festival survivor Shye Klein, speaking in the fall of 2023. It was barely 6 weeks since he'd escaped from the October 7th Hamas attack, but there he was in late November, and I was recording him as he tells his story to a group of students gathered in the campus Hillel Lounge at Toronto's York University. His words and experiences all the more powerful because Klein is a photographer. He'd brought a couple of cameras with him to the Nova Festival. He snapped portraits all night of the vendors and the partygoers, even though these kinds of events were not his scene. But after he moved to Israel from the Barrie, Ontario area just a few months earlier, on the spur of the moment, he decided to join some friends and a cousin for the true Israeli youth experience. While Klein survived, many did not. Nearly 400 people were murdered that day from the festival. He spent nearly 2 years receiving intense trauma counseling and trying to rebuild his career. He lost a $10,000 camera during the terrifying flight. He's since made it his mission to raise awareness about the struggles of the thousands of survivors like him. And he's become a sought-after speaker. By his estimate, he's been to approximately 240 cities around the world so far. Now, Klein never met social worker Joy Frenkiel in all this time, even though they've both been on emotional journeys. She's a Canadian from Shye, north of Montreal. She moved to Israel 30 years ago, and she works as a social worker in Ramat Gan. After October 7th, she was a frontline first responder, a social worker, posted at the IDF military morgue, where forensic teams identified the remains, a process that took months in some cases before the families could be informed. Here is how Joy Frenkiel described it to me when we first interviewed her in October 2023.
There's like a team that was identifying the bodies, and our role was to accompany the parents and the families as they were identifying their loved ones. And what that meant was going with a police officer who we received the people. They were waiting outside. There were lots of people waiting outside those gates, Ellen. We accompanied them, and the body was brought into a special tent. Every tent was meant for one family. The police and we looked at the bodies beforehand that we could warn the family what they were about to see.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, October 6th, 2025. Welcome to North Star, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Two Canadian Israelis, one who's spent half her life there, the other still a relative newcomer, both deeply changed because of their October 7th experiences. And we were privileged to meet them 2 years ago as guests of my podcast in separate episodes during the very early days after the massacre. When we wanted to do an episode for this 2-year anniversary, I reached out to each of them to see what their lives are like now. Both were conveniently visiting family in Canada during the high holidays before their next trips, and they agreed to come on together, even though at first they weren't sure how they might have anything in common. Klein is a veteran sought-after speaker, while Frenkiel is just starting to do talks. Yet despite their apparent surface differences, they both discovered speaking helps them, and so does photography as a vehicle for their storytelling. It's my honor to have Joy Frenkiel and Shye Klein join us today. Why don't we start by you introducing yourselves to each other?
Okay, hi Shye. My name is Joy Frenkiel, originally from Montreal, have been living in Israel for the past 30 years, practicing as a social worker. And since the October 7th massacre, I've really been working as a frontline social worker in various positions.
That's very important right now, especially in Israel. So, kol hakavod. Like Ellen mentioned, my name is Shye Klein, and I moved to Israel about 4 months before the Nova. And After attending the Nova Festival, I've began traveling North America to various schools and communities with different organizations and independently, speaking about my own personal experience with the students, showing them my photos I took at the Nova through a visual presentation that I put together using my photos, videos, maps, images from online, other context, news articles, as a way to sort of humanize what happened to us and sort of draw a connection between people in the diaspora and us back in Israel.
And I think, Joy, you're kind of doing that sort of yourself now, sharing your experiences. Let's talk about what you're here in Canada doing at the moment and recently.
I actually just came back from Huntington Beach, California. We were in a Twin City signing ceremony, and there I was able to tell the story of a Ramat Gan social worker and my role in the war. And here I'm back visiting family. I think it's the first time since October 7th that I've been in Montreal. And I was invited by a couple of agencies to present my story to professionals and lay people here.
Shye, you're a veteran presenter, traveler. Do you know how many talks you've given since you got back and started doing this in October?
Talks, no, but I know I've been to about 240 cities across the US and Canada. I was just in Norfolk, Virginia, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I spoke at Old Dominion University. I'm just mentally getting prepared for this October. I'm leaving on the 4th of October, and I'll be in a new place almost every day of the month.
Look, you said mentally prepare. Let's dig into that a bit. How does speaking help you, or does it help you?
Well, it's another way to express myself and just get it out there. Much like when I talk to my therapist, when I speak about what we went through, I'm mostly talking about, feelings, how it felt, what I thought, the overall mood, feelings in the country, the effect it has on you mentally, on everything. And I feel it does help me. But speaking with these communities, with these schools, with these students, with the faculty, hearing about their own personal experiences dealing with anti-Semitism in their communities, and just, feeling the amount of support that is present in the diaspora really helps in knowing that, there's people working besides me to make a difference and to make this whole situation a little bit more, well, tolerable is the wrong word, but that's the best word I can feel.
And Joy, put your two hats on, your own personal survival hat and then your social work hat. How does speaking help for you and coming to do these presentations?
There's a higher calling to do this kind of work. And I think that it's so important for people to hear our story and for people to hear the role of social workers, what we've gone through during the war and what we have done. And when I tell the story, it is therapeutic because I feel that I'm processing what I've gone through. I've gone through a lot of difficult things during the war as a social worker. And I think it's really important for people to hear it and to learn about it, for professionals also to learn about it, and for lay people to understand what everybody in Israel has gone through.
Now, Shye said that he's been receiving therapy. What did the therapists get or the social workers get?
So I'm very, very fortunate to work in the agency that I work at. The director of our agency, that's her prime concern, is her workers, and the mayor as well. After every intervention we've done, we've been able to get support to process it and to get any kind of support we need. We process it after. We have a peer group, and if we need professional help beyond that, we're also given that. A lot of people ask me how I got out of Shura without being traumatized. And I think that it's because of the help and support that we got after that we were able to talk about it. And we still write to each other. And I think that really, really helps.
Our listeners, just so you know, tell us, what is Shura and what did you do?
Okay, so Shura is an army base, and that was the morgue where everybody was brought to on the 7th of October to be identified. And I worked there accompanying families in identifying their loved ones that were murdered. It was a really, really hard thing in terms of, I mean, the sights, the sounds of the refrigerator trucks, the smell of death, the sound of reservists hammering coffins for their friends that were killed, for the soldiers. So it was a very, very big thing that could have led to a lot of post-trauma. But I was very, very fortunate to be amongst amazing people that really supported and still support and understand the need for the support.
Shye, did you want to say something? You're nodding.
No, I was nodding because that's terrible. That's something that had to be done and endured.
You know, Shye, a lot of things that we endured and we did, whoever thought that we would have to do and experience the things that we've experienced in the past 2 years. I think it's unbelievable, and it almost sounds unbelievable. It almost sounds as if these are things that we could make up, but unfortunately, they're not things that we have made up.
Both of you have had the occasion, and I'm not sure how many times, to go to the Nova site afterwards and the memorial, and then for different reasons and different circumstances. I'd like to discuss that first, if we could, because you were there, Shye. When was the occasion you had to go and revisit the site, and how many times?
The first time I was there, it was December 23rd-ish with Jake Tapper of CNN and a friend of mine for an interview. So all the bodies were gone. Everything else was still there. And it was nuts. Like, it was like the Nova exhibition, but 100 times the size and smelled worse. And I've been back maybe 30, 40 times, give or take, with different groups of, birth rate kids or volunteers or people who come on missions, or just going with a friend, or just going myself. I've gone back quite a bit.
Shye, I know that Joy has been and has had some interesting coincidences, experiences. I'd like her to share.
Okay, so I went to Nova very early on. I was there already in October.
Wow.
My memory is so different from yours because the first time I was at Nova, there was nothing there. I mean, the stage wasn't there. I don't remember it being there. It was just
Well, yeah, when I was there, the main stage was removed, but everything else was still there.
right. So for me, what I remember was just sticks in the ground to commemorate where people were. It was before their pictures were up. It was really, really at the beginning where there was just nothing, just sticks in the ground. I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times as well. 2 years ago I was also on the next of kin death notification team. And the last time that I was at Nova, I saw there was a picture of somebody that I had given her parents the notification that she was murdered at Nova. And it was the first time that I saw her there. And I just, I stopped in my tracks and I really wanted to honor her and honor that moment, that it was so sacred that I was the one that notified her parents, and here I was seeing her at Nova. So that was really, really difficult. And I'm sure for you also, Shye, that every time you go to Nova, you have a different experience. There's something else that comes in. It's like the narrative changes all the time.
For me, I don't like going there anymore. I don't like all the construction that's been done. I equate it to, what if you tore down the ovens at Auschwitz and put a parking lot? A lot of those changes, my understanding, are not the work of the government, but of families who are bereaved, who lost kids, and they are trying to memorialize their kids. And I totally respect that. I have no problem with that. But now, people like me who go to the Nova site have to tell other visitors, hey, we didn't have bunkers, we didn't have a parking lot, the road wasn't paved, we had no pathways, we had no shelters, we had no fog lights, we had no siren. So now we have to educate people what we didn't have there, because people get the wrong understanding of what the environment was like on October 7th because of those changes that were made.
And I guess when I went there in October, it was kind of like,
It was raw.
it was totally raw.
There was nothing done. There was nothing done until like January. Like, besides those sticks, besides those faces, I'm fine with that. That's okay. But that doesn't change the environment.
That's what really was. The sticks were where everybody was, and it was raw and unedited.
Shye, you don't like to go anymore.
I still go. I just, I never liked going after the fact anyways. Why would I? Why would I want to visit? Why would anybody want to have to visit the site of a massacre where people they know were killed? It's not something anybody wants to do, I feel, but, it's sort of like, I don't know. I don't want to use the word obligation or I have to or anything like that because I don't have to do anything. But, it's important, even with whatever changes are made.
To take people like CNN and Jake Tapper, because it's a bit of hasbara.
I hate that word so much. I don't see him doing hasbara. I think it's a nonsense word.
Fair enough.
I just call it advocacy.
What did you call it?
Advocacy. I'm advocating for people, for my group.
What do the group that you represent want?
I don't know. There's still quite a few Nova survivors. There's 411 people who are killed on October 7th in the Nova and 55 kidnapped. And, there's a lot of nonprofits and a lot of organizations out there who exist. A lot of people love to talk about the Nova and to fundraise using the story of the Nova. Not so much when it comes to donating to help Nova survivors. There's nonprofits in Israel that Americans don't know exist. And they're really not funded enough. And they do way better work for Nova survivors than some North American orgs that people prefer to donate to. There's one org called Safe Heart, Lev B'tuach. All they do is provide mental health care and therapy, psychiatry to Nova survivors, period. Nothing else. They don't do galas. They're not wasting their money just to make people feel good. They're spending the little money they have to help people heal. Like they got me a therapist before I was even recognized as a victim of terror by the government. That's what they do. And I come in North America and people would rather donate to an influencer or whatever than to organizations like Safe Heart because they don't know they exist because they're so small and have so little money. They can't afford to get it out there to North America, to Europe, to Canada.
So you mentioned the Nova exhibition. I didn't go to it in Toronto, but I know many, many thousands and thousands of people came and it was elsewhere. Wasn't that money going towards rehabilitation of survivors? That's what I thought.
That goes to like the Nova's programming and stuff like that. But then their stuff is like it's all over the country, but a lot of it's like in the center of the country. And there's people who are, all the way in Eilat who don't want to drive to the middle of Israel or to Netanya to receive whatever they're offering. Would you drive to Netanya from Eilat or from the Golan for a single therapy session? I wouldn't.
I also want to comment on that, Shye, that I'm from the center and in the groups, the Shura group that we're in, very often people are looking for therapists. And again, in the periphery, there's less therapists.
There's less everything.
Than in the city. That's right.
Before we change the topic, should say I know that the Jewish National Fund and the Friends of Jewish National Fund, for example, in Canada, are fundraising for specifically this kind of rehabilitation and resilience centers in the South.
Specifically for the communities in the South, though. Specifically for the kibbutzim and Sderot and Netivot, not the Nova.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your front and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
There was, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Can we talk a bit about your lives the last 2 years? Personally, I want to know, you told me, Joy, let's start with you, that you did certain tasks close to the October 7th. What is your duties now? What are your duties now in the last few months? Are you doing still follow-ups with these families that you had to knock on the door, or what's your
So first of all, for the protocol with the notification team, you go in once and you'll never see the family again. And you're supposed to give the notice and leave. You're not supposed to have ongoing contact with the family. So I'm not in contact with the families. The families do have their own therapists and they have their own people that they can go to. However, I do have contact with one of the families, and I'll discuss it a little later. Another thing that has happened since October 7th is the 12-day war with Iran, and Ramat Gan got hit 3 times within 6 days. And there were 4,000 evacuees. They became refugees within their own cities. I was at the scene of every attack, again, helping the Home Front Command account for missing people and working with the evacuees. The day of the third attack in Ramat Gan, we had evacuated over 1,000 people, and we had interviewed every single person before they were evacuated to hotels. We wanted to know their personal information. We wanted to know who was with them in the house, if they had any medical issues that needed to be dealt with. And they were successfully put into 40 hotels right away. So, following up with the victims, and I worked with all of the evacuees in a hotel. There were 350 evacuees in the hotel that I worked with. And we were with them day and night for a month. And, social workers did not sleep. We've been working around the clock since the October 7th massacre. My work has just taken on other dimensions that it was never like that. We're always in a war. We're always working with crisis and a new situation. So it's been very, very intense, to say the least.
Are you doing this? You said you wanted to talk about it later, but maybe just tell us now.
Okay, so one of the soldiers that had fallen, Eli Balsadeh, he was 19 years old and he was in Golani. He was at the Zikim army base. Apparently, he was considered a big hero because he was killed at 8 o'clock and not earlier. When the terrorists were caught and later interviewed, they were asked, why didn't you murder more people? There were more people beyond the army base. And they said, because the soldiers really tired us out. We didn't even have any more energy. His mother, Limol, reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. She heard about me, and she reached out to me to accompany her to Barzilai Hospital to track Eli's last steps in his journey, even though he was killed at the army base. And there we were able to track what happened to the soldiers on that day, how they were brought to trauma and then pathology and onwards. What happened was she was welcomed by the spokesperson of the hospital, which, was a big honor. One of the things that I also love to do is to photograph, and she asked me to photograph everything. So everything was filmed and photographed. We went from triage to the trauma room to where her son was in bed number 4 in room 4. When she went to pathology, she wanted to meet the director of pathology. And we were told, no, he's totally burnt out. He's post-trauma. He won't meet with people anymore. We don't allow him to meet with people, but he's just not well enough to do that. Later on, we were met by the hospital social worker who joined us. And little did we know that her son was murdered in Nova. And so here we were, 2 women joined by tragedy are together, supporting one another. And then as we were sitting in this room, the head of pathology came into the office. He was just passing by, and he started to talk about his experiences that day. And we all just held that space and were able to talk about everything that happened from our perspectives, because after the hospital pathology, they came to Shura. So it was like a full circle. And Eli's mother was able to get a lot of answers. She really wants closure. I don't know if that helped her with closure, but it certainly changed the narrative.
These encounters that are unexpected that happen to you, and I'm sure, Shye, you get this too, all the places you speak. Could you think of one story or encounter that helps give you hope?
Well, I don't know if it helps give me hope, but I met the cousin of Dora Avitan and Ran Schaefer to a man who I met at the Nova in North America when I was speaking. Rand Schaefer, his cousin, hosted me, and we didn't know. I'm telling her about my Nova experience, and I'm showing her my photos, and she says, "This is my cousin," and it was really insane. And then I met another cousin of Dora Bitan. It was the younger man who I met on Nova. He was working with his friend Dor Malka. They were selling clothing and jewelry and bags and stuff from Southeast Asia. After Hamas arrived, they murdered Dor and his friend Dor Malka. And then I think it was early this year, I was in the US. I think it was in maybe Florida or New York. I can't recall. But I met the cousin of Dora Bitan at their school, I think. Meeting his cousin, it was really difficult. After October 7th, I found everybody who I photographed and if they were alive or dead. And of the 54 people, 52 survived. So sort of like what you do, Joy, I had to find the families and say, "I'm sorry, but here's the last photo of your son or your husband alive, smiling."
And that must have brought so much comfort to the families in despite of the horrors and the atrocities to the families to see their kids happy and smiling and totally experiencing the vibe of Nova.
They were very appreciative of receiving these photos, but I wish I didn't have to give it in the first place.
So you both are still doing holy social work in your own ways. We're speaking just as President Trump and Netanyahu launched a 20-point plan for the end of the war, the return of the hostages, and the rebuilding of Gaza. I want to just get your take on this. 2 years later, where do you see yourselves? Are you hopeful now this is it? Are you not because of the 2 years you've just spent? Some people say Israelis are broken and they have no hope as of going forward to a new year. So I'm wondering where you find yourselves on this spectrum.
As a person, I'm always hopeful and I'm always optimistic. However, I don't think that we have any partner with Hamas, and I don't think that any offer that we'll put will come through. Although I wish it would end the war, I don't think that it will.
First of all, I think we missed our best shot. I think our best chance was November, the first deal we had when we had 53 hostages returned. I think that was the time to make the ultimate deal, whatever you want to call it. But I'm looking at the deal right now. First point is Gaza will be de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. I feel like that's I feel like that's a given. I feel like that's something that benefits Israelis and Palestinians, because if there's no threat to Israelis, then there's no reason for them to strike terror groups in Gaza and risk the lives of civilians. Gaza will be redeveloped to benefit its people. I feel like Israel owes it to the Gazan population to rebuild. We blew it up, and if we want to have peace and some sort of semblance of coexistence, we have to rebuild it. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Another terrorist group will just say, "Hey, you guys destroyed our home, didn't rebuild it. We're going to kill you again," for whatever else reason they can think of. We don't need to give them reasons to try and kill us. I feel like if we do our best and try and humanize people, like I'm doing in North America, trying to humanize victims of the Nova, it would help. We should do everything we can to get back the hostages. I think we should do whatever's asked, because the hostages are the priority. If they're willing to let these people from the Nova, from the kibbutz, other soldiers, sit in Gaza for 2 years, hostage of Hamas, they would let that be you or me or your sons or your daughters, your neighbors. No matter how Zionist or pro-Israel or pro-Netanyahu you are, you'd be in those tunnels in the exact same 2 years. And during these last deals, it's not like Hamas gives us the hostages randomly. We submit names of who we want to release, which means the government is choosing who stays for an additional year. We just struck Hamas in Qatar, which was universally disliked. And what happens when we do that and fail to kill terrorists? The hostages pay the price. They get tortured. They get beat with electrical wires. They get forced to watch Hamas terrorists eat. They lose a meal. They face the direct repercussions for every action and every stupid comment the Israeli government makes. Like when Smotrich talks about Gaza being a real estate bonanza, the hostages suffer for those words. And our soldiers kill themselves every month because they don't receive the mental health care they need after fighting in Gaza for 700 days. That's why they keep putting them in so quickly after they leave, because if you have time to think after you're out of combat, that's when the PTSD develops.
Joy and Shye, at the beginning of our conversation, you weren't sure you had a lot of overlap. Have you found some things that now you think are common ground with each other? And what message do you have for each other and our audience as we all mark October 7th?
I was just going to tell you to keep taking photos.
Absolutely. I think that's the overlap that we have is my stories are through my photos. Everybody laughs at me that I photograph so much, but in the end, it tells a story. And I think it's an important story that needs to be told, and it's beyond words, and it's going to stay with us forever.
For the actual October 7th, are you both still, you're going to be in the States, right, Shye? And you're going to be in Canada, Joy, or you're going home?
Well, it's funny because they're commemorating the October 7th this year on October 16th, which is my birthday. I'm going to be here in Montreal for October 7th.
And Shye, you're going to be doing your thing, speaking.
I will be speaking at Regent University in Virginia, which is a Christian university.
Amazing, Shye. Shal koach.
Yeah, I'm very looking forward to it.
Joy and Shye, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellen, very much.
Thank you for having me. V'am Yisrael Chai.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin's Charitable Foundation. Shye Klein is still raising funds for his new photography project. It's called Beyond the Supernova. His goal is to capture the personal stories of over 2,000 fellow survivors, highlight their challenges and their resilience, and bring it to major world cities where he feels it could help combat anti-Semitism. The charity he mentioned, called Safe Heart, works with Nova survivors who were using mind-altering drugs at the time. And we put links to that and about him and about Joy Frenkiel in our show notes. North Star is produced by Andrea Varsany and Zachary Judah Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer, and Brett Higgins composed the music. Thanks for listening.